I have done £30,000, £20,000, £20,000 again, and £10,000 variants of this video, but now you guys want me to go lower. So, how's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'll be showing you 10 super cheap luxury cars that you can buy for under £5,000, which is literally ridiculous. At some point, they probably looked like they were quite expensive, and today, debatable. I've ordered them from least to most brake horsepower to reduce bias on my side. And to go sub 5k, I've had to go a little bit sketchy on the old mileage in some instances, but you'll see in the video. Remember that I'm in the UK, so prices in other countries may differ, and remember that whenever you buy any second-hand car, maintenance, repairs, insurance, all that good stuff is important to remember. I can say that really fast now. If you enjoyed the video, there are two things you can do to help the channel out. Number one is to hit the like button. I'd really appreciate it, and so would the YouTube algorithm. Number two is to subscribe, as I post 2 videos every single week. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the video. Starting us off at number 10, we have the X350 or X358 facelifted Jaguar XJ with its 2.7 litre twin-turbo diesel V6 engine, putting out 204 brake horsepower, which takes from 0 to 60 in 7.8 seconds. It's the third generation XJ, and though the pre-facelift in particular is looking quite dated, it actually came with advanced technical features for its time, like a full aluminium unibody chassis and bodywork to save weight, and self-leveling adaptive air suspension. It was actually both 40% lighter and 50% stiffer than the previous generation, making it handle significantly better and less like a large yacht. It took a lot of its design from previous Jags, and I actually think it looks pretty nice in facelift spec at least, which gave it new bodywork almost all the way around and some interior changes too. That interior is madness, by the way, 100% Grandad armchair spec with that staple analog clock in the dash. These are listed for a minimum of around £2,000, and you'll get a 2008 facelifted example with just over 100,000 miles on it for £5,000, so still high mileage. In reality, £7,000 is around where these sit with reasonable mileages. Corrosion on the doors, boot lid, frame and wheel arches can be a worry. Transmission fluid has to have been changed every 50,000 miles according to specialists, and that 2.7 litre diesel engine is not renowned for reliability. I would recommend getting one of the petrol engines instead if your budget can stretch that far. Next up, it's a rogue one, but the Cadillac CTS is classed as an executive luxury saloon with its 2.8 litre V6 petrol engine, which puts out 208 brake horsepower and does 0 to 60 in 8.7 seconds. This is the first generation CTS produced between 2003 and 2007, and was the first Cadillac to be given a manual gearbox since 1988. It was designed to follow Cadillac's new art and science design language, and generally I tried to keep these videos relatively opinion free, but it isn't the most inspiring looking executive luxury saloon after all these years. Despite that, the interior is actually pretty luxurious for its time, if a little cheap and plasticky. It came in multiple specs too, so there are numerous colorways you could go for. I personally think that the interior somewhat makes up for its lackluster exterior. £3,000 is around the minimum you'll find these listed for, and for £5,000 you're looking at a relatively reasonable example with around 50,000 miles on the clock. There are 4 key problems known on these, stemming from the solenoid, timing belts or chains depending on which engine you go for, misfires and thermostat issues. The key thing that owners note, however, is that repair costs are much more expensive than you'd expect. Seems like the parts come at an unnecessary premium. In 8th we have a car from one of my favourite manufacturers, the Alfa Romeo 159, specifically with a 2.4 litre inline 5 turbo diesel engine, putting out 210 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 7.8 seconds. These come as either a saloon or estate, and the car was designed by the same man responsible for absolute beauts like the Alfa Giulia Sprint GT, Lotus Esprit, DeLorean and the Ferrari 250 GT, so it's no surprise that this car won numerous design awards for just how pretty it is. It shares its platform with the Brera and Spider, which is actually a bit of a shame, as this platform was known for weighing too much to the detriment of handling, although this platform is also very safe, so that is a bonus. Specs are dependent on trim, and there are 4 to choose from in most markets, but in the UK there were just 3, with Turismo Internazionale being the highest, gaining a nice premium luxury interior to match. You'll find this listed for under £1,000 at the bottom end, and for £5,000 you're looking at a 2008 example with around 75,000 miles on the clock. Some of these diesels suffer from exhaust gas recirculation valve issues, which you'll feel by delayed power. Cam belts need to be changed at 60,000 miles, the dual mass flywheel can make a clunking noise, and corrosion is known around the front subframe and floor pan. As I've said before, at least the car will look pretty on your driveway even if it isn't moving. Chrysler rarely appear in my list for videos, but on this occasion I think it's right to mention the 300C, a beefy luxury saloon in 3-litre turbo diesel V6 spec with 215 brake horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of 7.4 seconds. This is the first generation 300C, produced between 2005 and 2010, with the original intention being to make the car a modern version of the C300, built between 1955 and 1965, so it shares some of the key features like an extended bonnet and oversized grille. It also took some inspiration from the 1998 Chrysler Kronos concept car and came in 3 main non-performance specs: base, touring and limited, with the touring being an estate. The engine is the same as that in the Mercedes S320 CDI, and the car was actually relatively successful in Europe on release, winning multiple awards and even gaining favour from the Top Gear hosts. It appeared in a bunch of hip-hop music videos and was particularly popular in Britain as a poor man's Bentley. You'll find these listed for around £2,000 at the bare minimum, and £5,000 will get you a 2007 example with around 60,000 miles on it. These are known to have a few issues with electricals and the front suspension setup, but generally they're an easy or cheap fix, benefiting from having that Mercedes power plant. In terms of that engine, early examples suffer from swirl port motor problems, but cost just £50 to repair. The gearbox appears to be a key pain point though, so do look for leaking oil or low speed rumbling on throttle. Just missing out on the top 5 is the Audi A8 with its 3-litre V6 turbo diesel engine, putting out 216 brake horsepower, which gets from 0 to 60 in 7.6 seconds. This is the second generation A8, which had 2 different looks as it was facelifted in 2007 to have that much larger one-piece grille rather than the previous split grille setup. It's related to the Bentley Flying Spur and VW Phaeton as it sits on the D3 platform for large luxury cars, and it really is a big car, especially in long wheelbase spec at over 5 meters long and almost 2 meters wide. The car was meant to be innovative with multiple features that were first for Audi, and it was the first car ever with adaptive front lighting, switching the lights to provide the best visibility in any situation. What I like about this car though is that the interior hasn't dated as badly as some of the other cars on this list. Audi did a great job of keeping it simple but luxurious. £4,000 is the minimum you'll get one of these for, so for £5,000 you're looking at relatively high mileage examples from around 2006, so again £7,000 to £8,000 is around the right place for lower mileage examples of these. I've seen many owners complaining about the infotainment system failing, and a couple have air suspension failures, which can be an expensive fix, although a lot of people just seem to swap them out for coilovers if this happens. Timing chains are the main expensive problem to look out for, but a well cared for example is easily capable of 250,000 miles and beyond, going by owners on forums. I hope you enjoyed the video, but I wanted to stop for 1 second to mention that I was very recently asked to be in a podcast, the Tribus podcast, and it's my first ever time appearing in a podcast, so in the description down below I've put a link. You can listen to it on Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. I'd love to know your thoughts on how it went, because it was my first time ever doing it, as I said, so just let me know. And obviously drop them a follow as well, the Tribus podcast on Instagram, all that good stuff as well. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Up next we have the 4th generation BMW 730D with its 3-litre inline-6 turbo diesel engine, putting out 227 brake horsepower, which gets from 0 to 60 in 7.6 seconds. On release, the design was actually quite controversial as it moved very slightly away from the boxy BMW stylings of the past to something with a little more curvature, and of course the classic bangle butt to the rear. This design came as a result of a competition between 20 designers, and in the end the winner was the same man that ended up designing more recent BMWs like the 2010 5 Series and the X5. The 7 Series came as either a short or long wheelbase, referenced as the E65 or E66, although if you're someone who has people after them, you could go for the E67 high security model, which was an armoured variant instead. Oh, by the way, like many of the previous cars in this video, the interior is proper armchair spec as well, focused on being super comfortable and luxurious for all passengers, though of course a bit dated. £2,000 is the lowest you'll find these listed for, and for £5,000 you're looking at a 2007 example with around 100,000 miles on it. However, there are a lot of known issues with this car according to owners, particularly at higher mileages, and often have something to do with the transmission. It's also quite hard to work on, so if you're in the market for one, look for a nice BMW main dealer service history. You know I cannot do a list video on luxury cars without including the W221 Mercedes S-Class, and in this case it's the 320 CDI with its 3-litre turbo diesel V6 engine, putting out 227 brake horsepower, which takes from 0 to 60 in 7.3 seconds. That engine is the same as the one in the 300C mentioned earlier, but this time it sits in Mercedes' flagship luxury car, packed full of new innovations for the time, particularly around safety, suspension, comfort, multimedia and convenience. I don't have enough time in this video to go in depth on the S-Class, but I'm thinking about doing an in-depth video on S-Classes more broadly as the second in my Beyond the Badge series, so if this video gets 1,000 likes I'll get on with making that. it. The interior is very reasonable on these considering the age too. Fortunately, Mercedes kept it quite simple with decent materials, so it hasn't aged as badly as cars like the XJ for example. These are one of the more expensive cars on this list, with £4,000 being the bare minimum, and for £5,000 you're looking at a 2007 example with high miles still, while £6,000 to £7,000 is around where they start to look a bit more enticing. Generally these are known for being mechanically sound, but stretched timing chains can cause horrific problems, so listen out for rattling on idle. There are a lot of electrical problems with these however, as a result of all the mad tech that was packed into them, so do be aware of that. Taking third on this list is a personal favourite, the VW Phaeton, which sits on the same platform as the Bentley Continental GT. In a spec that fits our price limit for this video, it has a 3-litre turbo diesel V6, putting out 229 brake horsepower, which gets from 0 to 60 in 8.1 seconds. If you're getting deja vu, it's because it's very similar looking to the A8 mentioned previously, with a slightly modified but similar basic platform, and I've spoken in previous videos about how Ferdinand Piëch wanted to make a car that was better than the equivalent luxury Mercedes and BMW offerings, to get back at Mercedes for entering the lower cost market with their A-Class. In order to make the car as luxurious and competitive in the market as possible, VW ended up creating over 100 Phaeton specific patents in order to ensure that no one could copy what they had done. This actually makes it quite a unique car, so don't overlook it just because it's not a typically luxurious badge. These are listed for around £3,000 at the lower end, and for £5,000 you're looking at 100,000 miles ish on the clock. The main issues I can find on these are electrical ones, and they are generally more expensive to fix than your average VW, but overall, going by owners on forums at least, they seem to be pretty reasonable on reliability. Just missing out on the top spot is the Porsche Cayenne S with its 4.5 litre V8 petrol engine, putting out 340 brake horsepower, which gives it a 0 to 60 time of 6.6 seconds. Although the Cayenne isn't my cup of tea, I have raved about it in previous videos for it being so important to the Porsche brand we see today, in terms of saving them from debt and opening them up to a whole new market. Though Porsche purists didn't like it on release, over time it has seemed to grow into its own space in the market, and even those original ones had very decent handling and power for SUVs at the time. Their exteriors do look a bit dated, but their interiors are reminiscent of any Porsche of that era, with multiple specs to choose from. I personally recommend the lighter interiors in these to accentuate just how much space there is in the car. These are available for around £4,000 at the bottom end, and for £5,000 you're looking at around 100,000 miles on the clock still. Issues on these are well documented, and though maintenance is more expensive than cars from cheaper brands, owners note it isn't horrendous. The biggest known issues come from leaking coolant pipes, drive shaft support bearing failure, and transfer case or transmission problems, which will likely cause vibrations both for your car and your wallet. Taking the top spot is the fastest, most powerful, and probably most reliable luxury car on this list, the Lexus GS450H with its hybrid 3.5 litre V6 engine, putting out 341 brake horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of 5.7 seconds. Let's get that reliability point done early. Though owners have complained about battery pack issues, the engine was built to a very high standard, which meant the car won a ton of awards for just how well built it was, and owners have proven them to do well over 250,000 miles in some cases. Pretty cool stuff. The design is pretty simple on these, both inside and outside, so though it comes with many luxuries to keep you and your passengers comfortable, it's not a flashy luxury car by any means. It was meant to take Lexus's L finesse design language, which means being a bit more muscly with smoother lines around the car. One of my favourite features is the little hidden panel for controls that you don't use much in the car. Sounds silly, but I like that they're hidden away on an additional little panel. £3,500 is around the minimum you'll find these listed for, and for £5,000 you're looking at around 100,000 miles on the clock, but as mentioned, in the context of their reliability, that's not particularly worrying according to owners. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you do hit the like button. I would really appreciate it. Subscribe as well if you're new. Massive thank you to the patrons as always, and to you guys as well for watching. I'll see you in the next one.